Well, the encampment is in day 41 today, so this is the 41st day of the physical occupation. But we engaged with the family about 2 weeks before that, so somewhere between 41 and 55, depending on how you want to see it.
Um, so how is everything going for their case, and what chance do you think you have to protect her house, to keep her house?
Well, we're still here, and that's a good sign that whatever we're doing is working. The legal avenues have stalled out. The courts are really built in a way to make it impossible for homeowners to prevail, no matter what their case is. So we weren't expecting to, get a free house from, the court system or something. And I mean, Margarita Lucero, of course, they don't want a free house. They just want to be able to return to making their payments so that they can get the house paid off legally. I think that we have a really good shot here of eventually negotiating a solution. This is the way the cases normally go. That normally we try the legal case, and we get reminded, as always, that the courts are bought by the banks, and then we have to really make ourselves a fly in the ointment as much as we can in order to make it so that for them it's more expensive to lose face than it is for them to negotiate with the family.
So can I ask why their house is foreclosed on by the bank? I mean, the bank must give some reason. For example, you haven't paid enough, or you haven't paid your due payments. So why is their house foreclosed on?
Basically, their claim is that the house, that the loan went into default, and after going into default, they're just following the standard processes of what you do after that. First, the homeowner goes into default, and then you move to foreclose. And they're just saying, we're just doing what we're supposed to be doing. This is nothing fancy. The problem is the reason that they defaulted was not because they missed any payment. Margarita Lucero began pursuing a loan modification when she realized that future payments down the road were going to be too expensive to keep up with in a healthy way. And when she went and asked for a loan modification, the company offered her one. But it was dated, the date that they gave her the offer for the package, the first payment in the agreement was due the day before that. So the moment that they gave them that agreement, it put them into default. It wasn't that they'd missed any payments, it was that the bank illegally made the first payment of the new deal already overdue. And then they said, oh, you're in default, now we have to move to foreclose. Well, they'd never missed a payment. They'd never missed paying 1 cent.
So what's the when you are occupying this, what's the response from the bank?
Well, the bank is really afraid of having their name attached to something this horrible. That's why banks use servicers, not only to satisfy very low bar legal requirements, but also because it helps them say, oh no, we have nothing to do with this. This is those guys. But it's like, the mafioso handing off the hit job to one of their hitmen. Just because it's a thug who's doing it doesn't mean the kingpin isn't calling the shots. And their claim to the media is, oh no, we have nothing to do with this, we're only the trustees. And then they move into sort of the complex jargon about the different roles that people in loans have. You've got the beneficiary, you've got the trustee, you've got servicers, you've got agents. And they just start throwing those buzzwords around so that everybody's eyes glaze over and they say, I don't even know what you're talking about. That's the point. You're not supposed to get what they're talking about.
So do you mean that my understanding is the banks are actually giving the homeowners documents that is beyond their understanding, that is benefiting the banks. Can you explain a little about the documents thing? Because this is a nationwide issue, not necessarily related to
Right.
this case.
Right.
Can you explain a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, within documents, there are a lot of issues. One thing that they do is they make these loans incredibly complicated, to the point that a PhD in economics can't tell a good one from a bad one. And if a PhD in economics can't tell a good one from a bad one, how is a homeowner ever supposed to tell a good one from a bad one? In this case specifically, they did something really, really horrible, which was to misuse the language barrier in order to hurt the family. We're seeing in foreclosures across the board that people of minority descent are far more likely to be targeted, and people who don't speak English within those communities are even more likely to be targeted. In this case, this family was given a trial loan modification agreement, was what they thought they were signing, because the Spanish copy that they were given of the paper said that it was a trial loan modification. The problem is the English document, which they actually signed, was not that. It was a forbearance agreement, which is an agreement that you owe a delinquent debt that they didn't owe. So the bank told them they were giving them a loan mod, showed them a paper in Spanish that said you're getting a loan mod, and then handed them a contract which they said was the same as the one in Spanish, but that actually said something totally different. And that's just one of the, there are so many tricks that the banks pull because they just want houses. They just want to steal homes.
Another thing is, how do you evaluate the foreclosure crisis in the United States or in California? Across the board, not only in this case. How do you evaluate?
I see it as a land grab. I believe that we're in the middle of the largest land grab since colonial Europeans stole this land from indigenous peoples. This is obviously not as violent, unless you look at the rate of homeowner suicide, of homeowner depression, when you consider that family members who have sheriffs beat down their door and assault the house at gunpoint suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder and from other problems. This is a nationwide crisis, and it comes out of the fact that the banks have bought our legal system and have written the laws however they want, and they're so powerful that when they even break their own agreements, the laws that they themselves wrote, they still don't have to face the consequences for it, and we're here to make sure that they do.
So, how many houses have you occupied in order to save?
Well, this would be, as far as like physical home defenses go, this would be like the 5th or the 6th. I mean, it all comes in variable, fashion. The Perez home in Anaheim we occupied, but it was just like 5 or 6 of us because it was so far away. And we had an RV in the driveway, and we had some tents out front, some signs and everything. And I consider that a home defense, and we were successful in that one. Right now you've got Fort Hernandez and Fort Lucero where we're at right now, and they are, of course, much more elaborate. They involve whole blockades and, the barricade out front and everything. So those of those type, we've only really had 2. But Derma Rodriguez's home, the Perez home in Anaheim, Fort Lucero, Fort Hernandez. We were at Mary's home prior to her eviction. We were at Berta Herrera's home. If we hold a rally out in front of the house and we leave up signs, does that count? Because we had with Faith Parker, we had a defense like that. So it's as far as physical defenses go, a little over a half dozen. But as far as cases that we've helped on or cases that we're working on right now, a whole lot more.
So what's your next step in order to help this family?
With this family, we're going to continue to take action, continue to target our action as specifically as we can. We're trying to remind people at Deutsche Bank that Deutsche Bank may not be a human being. Even if our government considers corporations as people, they're not. But they're made of people. And the people in those corporations have neighborhoods, and they have homes, and they have responsibilities to their fellow man. And we're trying to work on individually reminding these people that it's time for them to reconnect with their humanity, because right now they're doing it a great disservice. We're also trying to put more pressure on Deutsche Bank directly by coming up with cool actions and really good ways to keep it fresh and to keep the media coming out. We just had six people were arrested outside of Deutsche Bank in Century City. that got a lot of front cover press and was really exciting. But we have more actions like that, even more creative ones coming up around the bend. So keep your eyes open.
So you have 56 people arrested. So what is going on with those arrested people?
The folks who were arrested that evening have been released. They're out of jail.
Okay.
We did just have a different incident that was unrelated really to a direct foreclosure defense in which 7 occupiers from Fort Hernandez were illegally arrested in Pasadena. 6 of them have been released and 1 of them is still being held on bogus charges.
I have some other questions like, so do you think there is legal foreclosure in this country, or do you think foreclosure is totally illegal in itself?
I think that there are legal foreclosures going on. I believe that they involve specific dates. For instance, I can say with near complete certainty in my mind, I'm at peace with saying that every loan, every single mortgage that I've looked at that was dated from 2003 to 2009, every single one has been fraudulent. That's not to say that there haven't been ones since then that may have been done properly, but the banks got so greedy and they got so comfortable with having their rigged game that they stopped following their own rules. And at this point, the only thing left to do is to hold them accountable for their own actions.
I remember that your organization has appealed in the city council maybe more than 1 month ago. And what is the city councilor doing in order to respond to this crisis? Do they have some actions?
Well, the city only has so much power to do so much. For instance, the actual evictions are carried out by the sheriff's department, and the sheriffs are a division of the county. So the county actually has more of a say than the city does. With that said, there are some legislative moves that the city can make in small ways, and city councilors who get behind homeowners who are in distress can help lend political pressure and things like that. I would say that we're playing a long-term game with the mayor's office in working with certain individuals within City Hall in the hopes that they're going to reach positions that have more of a direct say in the future. We're also simply trying to keep the city aware of what's going on, because when the county is responsible for enforcing it, it can be easy for the city to not realize just how bad what it's doing is. There's also a new agreement that was brought up by Councilman Richard Alarcon, which involves allowing private investors to buy back houses that are in foreclosure from homeowners, and then to sell those properties at the current market rates back to the city government, so that the city government can then give them back to the homeowners at the current market rate. It sounds like a reasonable proposal, but it has a number of very dangerous potential legal problems involved with it. And so we're trying very hard to keep city council aware that while what they're doing may be well-intentioned, if they hand off the controls, the reins over this program to the people who want them, they're going to be putting the foxes in charge of the hen house once again, and the same banks who ripped us off again are going to be in a great position to do it to us twice.
Can you tell me how to spell the name for the city councilor who is coming up with this?
Sure.
How to spell it?
His name is Richard, Richard. Alarcon, Alarcon. Yeah, Alarcon.
Can I interview him or contact him to get more information?
About that program, you can try.
Yes. Can you tell me how to contact him?
Sure, I could look up his office's information. I mean, you could just Google it. You could just
So,
Google Richard Alarcon's
okay.
office
Okay. Okay, I'll do that.
or City Councilman Richard Alarcon, anything like that.
Okay.
He's got 18 ethics investigations pending right now. He's been charged with 18 felonies for voter fraud. He and his wife.
Oh, so, but is he still in office?
Yeah.
Or he's in jail?
No, he's still in office.
So why, but he's
I think
charged with-
actually, he might have actually just left office because I know that he's getting termed out, and I think that he's running for state assembly, and that the state assembly member is running for his seat, so they're just trying to switch seats, basically, because they're both being termed out. He might not actually be in. Is Alarcon out?
I don't know.
I don't know. I can look into it for you. Let me work on that. Do you have any other questions?
So you, another thing is, so what are the investors who are wanting to buy houses from the banks when the bank are doing foreclosure?
Well, they're investors that buy the debt for very cheap. Like when you have an outstanding debt, the banks, if they think that there's not a good chance that they're going to recover that money, like say you owe $100,000, the bank wants to get back $100,000, but if they don't think that you're going to pay up any of that money, what they do is they sell that debt to somebody else at a big discount. So say you owe $100,000, the bank might sell that debt to a collections agency for $20,000, and then the collections agency comes after you, and then they get all the money that they recover from you. So it's groups like that. Investors, most of the cases, the investors bought the properties a long time ago. They were securitized, they were packaged up in giant bundles and sold to investors. And so now the investors own them, but they didn't realize that they were being sold a bunch of loans that were built to fail. And the banks at that point are just being like, oh no, we have nothing to do with this. We're innocent. Like, look at us.
So basically, the investors are business owners, or
Yeah, well, it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell. In
Uh-huh.
many cases, the investors are the banks themselves, and they're just pretending that there are investors so that they can hide from responsibility. Sometimes it's investors that buy the properties individually at auctions. That's very rare. Most of the time, the property, when it goes to auction, defaults back to the bank. Most of the investors come in when the loan has been securitized, and at that point, they basically claim ownership of the property as soon as it's foreclosed upon. The problem is those properties often were never put into the trusts that they claimed that they were, so the whole thing gets really gnarly. It's extremely complicated.
So what is the California law has? Is there any law in California to, in relation to foreclosure, to say that in how many months that you can't pay, you should be foreclosed? Any law in California like that?
Well, I believe after the notice of default arrives, they have to wait 3 months before the trustee's sale can happen where they auction your house. There's a set of protocols that they have to go through in order to legally foreclose. They normally just ignore those, so that doesn't really matter. So yeah, there are laws, but they don't really obey them. The only real laws that they obey are things like you have to wait 30 days to do this, so on day 31 you can be sure they'll be there to do it.
Yes, basically I finished the question.
Sweet.
Thank you.
Of course. Let's see if Alarcon is still in office.
No, it works.